How to start a Go project in 2023. How to start a new Go project. Go mod init. My module Go's default toolchain is fine. Everything else is optional. Some questionable advice in the article. Vendoring dependencies using Go mod vendor is not a good default workflow. It bloats the repo. The checked-in code is impossible to review, and is generally a pain to keep up to date. Don't, unless you really have to. There's no point in stripping a binary or even using UPX on it unless you're targeting extremely low memory environments, in which case Go is the wrong tool anyways. All it'll do it make it harder to debug. I'm on the vendor bandwagon. Always have been. I don't want a GitHub outage to dictate when I can build, deploy. Yes, that happened. That is why we vendor smiley face. Now you can set up a proxy server. However, I don't want to do that. I'm pretty sure I have a few vendored packages that no longer exist at their original import path. For code reviews, we put off checking in the vendor path till the end if possible. UPX only means smaller files on the disk, but it comes with a cost. It tends to increase memory requirements, because the binary on the disk cannot be mapped to memory anymore. Unless it's uncompressed somewhere in the file system. Worse, if you run multiple instances of the same binary, none of them can be shared. A bit simplified, without UPX, 100 processes of 100 MB binaries requires only 100 MB RAM for the code, but with UPX 10 GB. Edit. In reality, likely only a fraction of that 100 MB needs actually to be mapped into memory, so without UPX true memory consumption is even less than 100 MB. Can you expand on this a bit? I use UPX at work to ship binaries. Are you saying these binaries have different memory usage UPX than they do otherwise? Every instance of a program will use an amount of RAM equal to the uncompressed size. If the application is uncompressed, the uncompressed executable will be loaded into RAM one time and be reused by every instance of the application. Any source that you can cite for this? I'm not saying you are wrong. I'm just curious to see more proof of this. The checked-in code is impossible to review. While there are valid arguments against vendoring dependencies, I'm not convinced this is one of them in the typical case. It's exceptionally easy to ignore certain directories when reviewing PRs in GitHub, although I still wish this was available as a repo-level preference, and I'd hope at least this would be the same in GitLab, Bitbucket, etc. I don't review vendored dependencies, and I wouldn't expect anyone else to, although the utility of that is admittedly domain-dependent. Go also has the benefit that its dependencies tend not to be in deep chains, so the level of repo bloat when vendoring is usually not too terrible, at least relatively speaking. Yeah, if you have a problem with it, split it into two separate commits to review separately. But WTF is this about not reading your dependencies? Read your dependencies. It is the most amazing superpower for someone to be like, I don't know how Redux handles that, and you can just tell them because you have read Redux. And that's also how you'll know. Hey, do they have tests? Are they doing weird things with monkey patching classes or binaries at runtime? Oh, the request is lazy. It doesn't get sent unless you attach a listener to hear the response. What would it look like for the debugger to step through their code, and is that reasonable for me to do, or will I end up 50 layers deep into the call stack before the code actually does the thing? I get it. This dependency is 100,000 lock, and if you printed it out, that's basically 5 textbooks of code. You'd need a year to read all of that and truly understand it. Well, don't use that dependency. But I need it for dependency injection. I mean, if that's all, then use a lightweight one or roll a quick solution in a day, or explicitly inject your dependencies in 5 pages or. My point is just that you have so many options. If that thing is coming at 5 or 50 textbooks or whatever it is, what it actually means is that you are pulling in something with a huge number of bells and whistles, and you plan on using 0.1% of them. There's no point in stripping a binary or even using UPX on it unless you're targeting extremely low memory environments. I really dislike absolutes like this. My target is 30,000 plus servers, and distributing a binary to all of them is a lot easier when it is 3M than when it is 26 meters. I don't really believe that. At the speed of Nick, it makes pretty much zero difference even on 30K servers. Shaving couple of ms at worst few seconds versus modifying a binary, def not worth it. The servers are not all on Gigi. Many are on 100 MB, and yes, that saturates the network when they are all updating. I learned through trial and error. The updates are not pushed, they are pulled. Why? because the machines might be in some sort of rebooting state at any point. So trying to first communicate with the machine and timeouts from that would just screw everything up. So, the machines check for an update on a somewhat random schedule and then update if they need to. This means that a lot of them updating at the same time would also saturate the network. Smaller binaries matter. I'm curious why you've got servers on 100 megabits. Last time I ran a server on 100 MB was more than 20 years ago. I remember the experience well because we needed AppleTalk support, which wasn't trivial on GBE, for reasons unrelated to GBE, but that's another topic entirely. What's your use case for having machines on 100 megabits? Are you using GBE hardware but dropping down to 100 megabits? And if not, where are you getting the hardware from? Sounds like you might work in a really interesting domain, smiley face. Because the 12 GPUs in them are a lot more important than the networking speed. Smiley face, they were for mining ETH. We've turned them off though now that POS has been successful. For large-ish scale distributed updates like that, maybe some kind of P2P type of approach would work well. IBM used to use a variant of BitTorrent to internally distribute OS images between machines. That was more than a decade ago though, when I was last working with that stuff. Vendoring dependencies using Go Mod Vendor is not a good default workflow. It bloats the repo. The checked-in code is impossible to review, and is generally a pain to keep up to date. Don't, unless you really have to. Go setup is that if you don't vendor your dependencies then your build might break at any time, no? Not if your default $Go proxy is Google. Google will cache that package indefinitely? Vendoring is a bit of project smell, but for large teams it removes the confusion of who has what version of a dependency. Unfortunately, most teams don't schedule a periodic go mod tidy, so you just end up with ancient deps. Most people never read the code of the deps they pull in, so I don't think vendoring provides any security assurances. Pretty good article. One comment. It recommends Zerolog for logging, but recently Slog 1 has started to become part of the standard lib. I guess it's the future. 1. Package go.dev. golang.org/x/xp/slog. I see the note in the article around using LD flags equals SW. Is there any other useful tool for binary size analysis reduction? I was surprised when my binary size doubled when incorporating the K8's client package to get a secret. Just using the HTTP secrets API manually without referencing the client package shrank the size by many MB. It would be nice to find similar opportunities for size reduction that aren't as obvious. I'd add, what's the best web framework? And answer it with, no. Go comes batteries included. I see $GoPath is no longer strictly needed, which is nice. But what's the deal with $Goroot? I seem to always need it set, but I don't know if that's just my workflow or force of habit. Genuine question. I'll often see Golang pretty heavily criticized here on Hacker News. Either that or people say it's a boring language and not worth learning when there is something more interesting, usually referring to Rust or Zig. Why does it have such a bad image? Personally, I like it as an alternative for Python because, 1. It can build binaries that just work for most architectures quickly. 2. It has nice C-like syntax without some of the headaches. 3. It seems to be really nice for creating APIs or backends, especially for web projects. Lately I use it as an alternative to PHP, to build MPs which are enhanced with HTMX. 4. It seems very beginner-friendly and easy to start with and has a non-gatekeepy community. There are also some things I don't like so much, such as, 1. Goroutines and other Go-specific stuff. 2. The dependency system requiring full import paths with URLs. 3. The strictness about syntax, etc. The fact that saving a file with an unused import will remove it in the IDE. But it overall seems much nicer than running Node, JS or Python on the server side. No. HN loves playing obligatory contrarian. So often commenters will go to lengths to find faults. There is nothing wrong with Go. It delivers on its promise. You don't need to be a genius to use it. Has good community support, and you can get access to a large and decent job market. Rust is a great tool but isn't as purpose-suited to network services as Go. Zig is even less purpose-suited to writing network services and won't be at Go's level of maturity for years. If ever, if a backend dev could only know one language in 2023, it would be hard to go wrong with Go. It's verbose. Errors everywhere. There are a lot of foot guns. Nil slice? Fine. Nil map? Segfault. Loop variables with closures. The list goes on. Generics seemingly split the community. Maybe some libraries won't get used because they picked the wrong side. It's surprisingly weak at modeling data. Union types would really help out. The community is so anti-design that it's hard to play with them. Most want to make a big ball of mud and call it agile. When you point out simple patterns, they call you an architect astronaut. Check out R. Golang. Also look out for people telling you how dumb you are for wanting generics. In many cases it's a step backwards, but it has the positives you posted. That is often a reason to grin and bear it. Eventually Stockholm Syndrome kicks in. Yeah, it's pretty much optimized for junior programmers to write Babby's first enterprise network service in. It's got a lot of features junior programmers think are nice and easy to work with, but as you mature as a developer its verbosity becomes annoying and its shortcomings become apparent. Using Go as a PHP alternative is pretty much the use case most aligned with its niche. So go nuts if you like doing that. But stray too far from that use case and Go will start to provide pain without adequate justification, especially when compared against Zig, Rust, or even TypeScript. The post I'm replying to is downvoted and I should probably simply move on, but there's key phrasing here I'd like to point out. Optimized for junior programmers to write Babby's first enterprise. This is the toxic attitude Go strives to distance itself from. There is no magic. We can all be equals in this place. It's humbling. I'm not aware of any other mainstream project that captures this essence so well. There is power in a language equalizing things. If you aspire to wring elegance out of complex or esoteric language features, then by all means have fun with that, but I have no interest in working with you on that. Your definition of pain could not possibly be more diametrically opposed to mine. Flagged.